Captain June Park stood by the window of the diplomatic vessel, watching the glittering spires of the Galactic Concorde's central hub station grow larger as they approached. The blue-green light from the nearby nebula cast shadows across his face, as he mentally prepared for another day of smiling through gritted teeth. "Captain, we're receiving landing clearance," said Lieutenant Mina at the controls. "They're directing us to the auxiliary docks. Again." June nodded without surprise. The auxiliary docks were reserved for low-priority visitors, typically developing worlds or non-member species. Earth had been part of the Concorde for 3 years now, yet they were still treated like newcomers at a fancy dinner party. "Standard procedure, Lieutenant," he replied, straightening his uniform. "At least they're consistent in their disrespect." The ship settled onto the landing pad with a gentle hiss of hydraulics. Through the viewport, June could see that no welcoming committee awaited them, not even a junior diplomatic officer. Just another subtle reminder of humanity's place in the cosmic hierarchy. "Should I notify Admiral Kim of our arrival?" asked. Mina June checked his comm device. "She's already here. Arrived yesterday for the military coordination briefing. I'll meet her before the General Assembly." The walk through the station's corridors was like moving through an alien wildlife sanctuary. Beings of all descriptions moved with purpose. The crystalline bodies of the Tarsians catching light as they glided past, the misty forms of the telepathic Veldari floating several inches above the floor, and the interconnected units of the ancient Moru collective moving in perfect synchronization. Humans were rare enough in these halls to draw curious glances. Some were merely scientific interest, others barely disguised disdain. June had learned to ignore both. Admiral Hana Kim was waiting in their designated meeting room, a cramped space near the waste recycling systems. The constant hum of machinery made it difficult to monitor the room for surveillance, which was precisely why they chose it. "Another productive day among our esteemed galactic brothers and sisters?" Hana asked, her tone dry as desert sand. June allowed himself a small smile, about as productive as trying to farm asteroids with a plastic spoon. Hana activated a small device on the table. A soft blue field surrounded them, their best defense against the Veldari's telepathic eavesdropping. "Show me what we've got," said June. The Admiral's fingers danced across her tablet, projecting a holographic display between them. Star charts, ship movements, resource allocations, all data that they were technically allowed to have, but which told a story the Concord preferred to keep hidden. "Colony ship HFY was redirected from the Proxima system last week," Hana said, highlighting a route adjustment. "The official reason was unexpected stellar activity making the approach unsafe. And the real reason? Our deep space telescope network picked up Tarsian mining ships entering the system 2 days later." June rubbed his temples. It was the same pattern they'd documented dozens of times. Humanity would discover resource-rich planets or asteroids, begin planning settlement, or mining operations only to be delayed or rerouted by Concorde safety regulations or administrative reviews. Shortly afterward, more established species would begin harvesting those same resources. "What about our technology sharing petition?" he asked. Hana's expression darkened. "Denied. Again. The Moru claimed our fusion containment designs don't meet Concorde safety protocols. Meanwhile, they're implementing a suspiciously similar system on their new cruisers." A soft chime indicated someone approaching. They quickly deactivated the hologram as the door slid open. A Tarsian diplomat stood in the doorway, crystal facets glinting under the artificial light. "Representative Park." The being's translation device produced flat metallic speech. "The Council will hear Earth's petition regarding the trade tariff adjustments now. We expected you 13 minutes ago." "My apologies," June replied with a practiced smile. "Our communication systems must have missed the schedule change." There had been no schedule change. It was another small humiliation. Moving meetings forward without proper notification to make humans appear unprepared or disorganized. "Please proceed to Chamber 4. The Tarsian said, before gliding away. Hana gave him a look that spoke volumes. "How much longer do we keep playing their games?" "As long as necessary," June replied, straightening his uniform jacket. We continue gathering evidence, we continue building our case, and we continue smiling. In the Grand Council Chamber 4, the i.e., smallest of the Concord's meeting rooms, June delivered Earth's carefully prepared petition. He cited precedents, regulatory frameworks, and economic impact studies showing the disproportionate burden placed on human goods by current tariff structures. The council representatives listened with expressions ranging from boredom to mild amusement. When he finished, the Veldari representative floated forward slightly, misty tendrils swirling. We appreciate Earth's enthusiastic participation in Concord affairs, the being said, the translator giving its words a silky quality. However, emerging economies must understand that market protections exist for stability reasons. Perhaps in another decade, when human industrial practices have matured, the dismissal was wrapped in diplomatic language but clear nonetheless. June maintained his composure, thanked the council for their consideration, and retreated from the chamber with dignity intact if nothing else. That evening, in the secure Earth Embassy quarters, June added the day's recordings to their growing archive, while Hana updated their strategic assessment. Patience has always been humanity's true strength, she said quietly. Not our technology or our resources or our adaptability. It's our ability to endure, to wait for the right moment. June looked at the galaxy map on the wall, small blue dots representing human outposts, just 17 systems in a sea of thousands. And, if that moment never comes? He asked. Hana's eyes met his, calm and certain. It will. And when it does, no species in this galaxy will ever forget what happened when humanity's patience finally snapped. Professor Deholi's hands trembled slightly as he made the final adjustments to his quantum resonance array, not from fear, but from excitement. After 3 years of work in his underground laboratory on Europa, Jupiter's ice-covered moon, he was about to achieve what the Concord species had insisted was impossible for humans: instantaneous communication across vast distances without relying on the Concord's controlled network. Recording test sequence 27, he spoke into his log. Power at 60%. Targeting receiver station on Mars. The laboratory hummed as energy flowed through systems of his own design. On the main display, wavelength patterns stabilized into a perfect synchronization curve. Deho held his breath as he pressed the transmission key. 3 words appeared on his screen. Europa hears Mars. It had worked. The message had traveled instantly across millions of kilometers without using any Concord relay stations. Deho let out a whoop of joy that echoed through the underground facility. Get Director Jinwoo on a secure line, he told his assistant. Tell him Twilight Protocol just became operational. 2 days later, the lab was swarming with Concord inspectors. The crystalline Tarsian inspector moved around Deho's equipment, light refracting through its body in patterns that suggested disapproval. This technology was not included in your research declaration, the translator device stated flatly. Deho maintained a neutral expression. It was an unexpected development from our approved quantum mechanics study. The Veldari inspector, a misty form contained in an environmental suit, drifted between the servers. These configurations exceed permitted parameters for human research facilities. We weren't aware of any restrictions on computational configurations. Deho replied carefully. The third inspector, a joined unit of the Moru Collective, stepped forward. The Council has determined that this technology presents unforeseen risks to Concord communication security protocols. This facility is now sealed under Safety Regulation 478B. Deho watched helplessly as they placed security locks on his DABI equipment. May I ask when we can expect a review of this decision? Applications for review may be submitted after the standard waiting period, the Tarsian replied. Which is? 27 Concord standard cycles. Almost 40 Earth years. By then, the technology would be obsolete or more likely appearing in newly developed Concord systems. It wasn't the first time this had happened. It wouldn't be the last. Thousands of kilometers away on New Busan, the 7th human colony, world, Governor Sujin stood on a ridge overlooking what should have been the site of their new mineral processing facility. Instead, she watched Concord survey ships hovering over the richest deposit of rare earth elements ever discovered outside the solar system. Her communication device buzzed. "Governor, the Concord representatives have arrived for your meeting." She took one last look at the valley below before heading back to the colony's administrative center, a collection of prefabricated buildings that they hadn't bothered making more permanent. Experience had taught them that permanence was a luxury. The Concord rarely allowed human settlements. The meeting room contained representatives from 3 Concord species. They didn't bother with pleasantries. New Busan has been designated a Category 4 Cultural Preservation Zone, announced the Tarsian representative. Sujin kept her voice steady despite her rising anger. There are no indigenous cultures on this planet. Our surveys confirmed that before we established the colony. The Veldari representative's misty form shifted slightly. New archaeological evidence suggests previous habitation. The details are classified under Concord Heritage Protection statutes. How convenient, Sujin thought but didn't say. Instead, she asked, "What does this mean for our colony?" "Full evacuation within 2 standard cycles," replied the Moru unit. "Reasonable relocation compensation will be provided according to Schedule 5 guidelines. Schedule 5, the minimum payment structure. Barely enough to cover the cost of transport, let alone the lost investment, and there would be no appealing the decision, not with any hope of success." As the representatives left, Sujin received a message on her secure channel. Documentary evidence secured. Proceeding to Phase 2 protocols. 3 weeks later on Earth, deep beneath the rebuilt city of Seoul, humanity's leadership gathered in a chamber designed to be impervious to all known forms of surveillance. Admiral Hana Kim stood at the central table, surrounded by the 25 men and women who represented Earth's unified government. "This brings our documented cases to 43, she said, adding New Busan to the holographic display. 17 instances of technology suppression, 26 cases of resource appropriation disguised as regulatory action. Intelligence Director Jin Woo stepped forward. "We've confirmed that the Tarsians began mining operations on New Busan within hours of the evacuation order. They're not even trying to hide it anymore." "The pattern is undeniable," said Defense Minister Tae-won, his weathered face grim in the low light. "The Concord has no intention of allowing humanity to advance beyond our current position. We are being systematically contained." Captain June Park, now Earth's chief representative to the Concord, studied the evidence arrayed before them. For years, he had been the voice of restraint, of diplomacy, of giving the Concord species the benefit of every doubt. "Show me the population projections," he requested. A new display appeared, human expansion rates under current Concord restrictions compared to natural growth. The gap was widening. In 50 years, they would face critical resource shortages. "We cannot delay implementation of the contingency protocols any longer," Admiral Hana said, voicing what many had been thinking for years. "Every day we wait, we lose ground." "The quiet storm is ready?" June asked. Defense Minister Tae-won nodded. "The hidden shipyards are at 97% completion. The Special Forces teams have completed their training cycles. The communication network is in place thanks to Professor Lee's breakthrough. We can begin within 30 days. June stared at the galactic map, at the tiny blue dots representing human holdings amid the vast territories of the Concord species. Once they took this step, there would be no going back. "I request one final diplomatic approach," he said finally. "Not because I believe it will succeed, but because when history looks back on this moment, it must be absolutely clear that we exhausted every peaceful option." The room fell silent. They had all seen what happened to species that challenged the Concord openly. None had succeeded. "And if diplomacy fails again?" asked Sujin, who had returned to Earth after the New Busan evacuation. June's expression hardened, showing a side of himself that he never revealed in the Concord chambers. "Then we show them exactly what humanity is capable of when pushed too far," he said quietly. "And we make sure it's a lesson no species in this galaxy will ever forget." The research vessel, Hanseong, drifted silently through the darkness of disputed space, its sensors quietly documenting what the crew had discovered. Inside the command deck, Captain Minho gripped the edge of the display table as the holographic images rotated before him. The evidence was unmistakable. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper despite the fact that they were alone on the bridge. Old habits from years of Concorde surveillance died hard. Science Officer Ji-Yoon nodded, her expression grim. "The chemical signature is unique to Earth colonies. These asteroids were stripped from New Busan. The residual radiation patterns match exactly." Minho closed his eyes briefly, processing the implications. For years, the Galactic Concorde had claimed that evacuation of human colonies was necessary for environmental protection, cultural preservation, or safety concerns. The truth floating before them in high resolution told a different story. Systematic theft. "How many other sites have we confirmed?" he asked. 17, Ji-Yoon replied. "All former human territories, all now being harvested by Tarsian mining operations with Concorde security escorts." Minho activated the secure transmission protocol that Professor Daeho had developed, the one that could bypass Concorde monitoring systems. "Upload everything to Admiral Kim. Use compression algorithm 7. The data package was nearly complete when proximity alarms blared across the command deck. Ji-Yoon's fingers flew across the console. Tarsian patrol vessels, 3 of them. They've altered course to intercept. Minho's expression hardened. "Evasive maneuvers. Continue the transmission." "They're hailing us," the communications officer reported, claiming we've violated Concorde border restrictions. "We're in neutral space according to all registered charts," Minho replied. "Respond with our coordinates and continue the transmission." The ship lurched suddenly as energy weapons impacted their shields. Red warning lights flashed across every station. "They're firing without warning," Ji-Eun shouted, gripping her console, as the ship rocked again. Minho's voice was steel as he gave the order they had all hoped to avoid. "Activate defense protocols. Transmission status?" 93% complete, the communications officer replied, fingers dancing across her console as another impact shook the ship. "Get to the escape pods," Minho ordered. "Take the backup data cores. I'll hold them off until transmission completes." "Captain, that's an order," he cut her off. "This evidence must reach Earth." The bridge crew reluctantly complied, moving quickly to the evacuation stations. Minho stayed at the helm, maneuvering the ship to protect the fleeing escape pods, as the Tarsian vessels closed in. The console before him flashed green, transmission complete, just as another blast rocked the ship, shattering conduits and sending sparks cascading across the bridge. As darkness claimed the failing vessel, Minho allowed himself a small smile. The evidence was out. Whatever happened next, the truth would not die with them. 3 days later, in the emergency council chamber of the Galactic Concorde, Representative June Park stood before the assembled delegates. Behind him, Admiral Hana Kim stood at parade rest, her uniform immaculate, her expression unreadable. "The Concorde deeply regrets the unfortunate incident involving your research vessel," the Tarsian representative was saying, crystal facets refracting light in patterns that indicated diplomatic concern. "The ship was destroyed when it attempted to flee from a standard identification check, suffering a catastrophic drive failure. A most regrettable accident," added the Veldari representative, misty tendrils swirling in what humans had learned to recognize as false sympathy. "We have recovered some survivors and are providing them with appropriate medical care." June nodded politely, his face a mask of practiced calm. "And the location of these survivors?" "They are being processed through standard protocols," the Moru Collective representative replied. "They will be returned to human authorities once debriefing is complete." June reached into his pocket and withdrew a small data cube, placing it on the central display podium. The chamber lights dimmed as the recording began to play, crystal clear footage from the Hanseong's final hours. Evidence of systematic resource theft from abandoned human colonies. Tarsian mining operations on planets declared protected zones. intercepted communications revealing coordinated efforts to suppress human technological advancement. The final image showed the Tarsian patrol vessels opening fire without warning on an unarmed research ship in neutral space. Silence fell across the chamber as the display faded. "We have recovered our survivors," Admiral Hana said into the quiet, her voice carrying to every corner of the room, along with the complete data archives from the Hanseong. The Veldari representative's misty form churned in agitation. "This is clearly manufactured evidence. Deliberate provocations from a species that repeatedly ignores Concord regulations and, perhaps," the Veldari interrupted, floating slightly forward, misty tendrils swirling in what humans had long ago learned, was an expression of contempt. Perhaps humans should learn their proper place in the galactic hierarchy. The chamber fell silent. June looked up from his notes, meeting the Veldari's gaze directly. With deliberate movements, he gathered his materials, closed his diplomatic portfolio, and stood straight-backed before the council. "We have learned," he said, his voice quiet yet carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "And you have taught us well." He turned to Admiral Hana, who had remained motionless throughout the exchange, and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Hana raised her hand to her ear, activating her communication implant. She spoke 5 words that would echo throughout the history of the galaxy. Operation Quiet Storm is now active. Across human space, hidden shipyards that had been constructed in asteroid belts and beneath the surfaces of uninhabited moons powered up their manufacturing systems. Special forces, teams that had trained for years in secret facilities, received their activation codes. Deep within Earth's crust, Professor Deho's quantum communication network bypassed every Concord monitoring system as it carried encrypted commands to the 17 human colonies. As June and Hana walked calmly from the council chamber, ignoring the confused shouts and demands of the Concord representatives behind them, June's personal communication device chimed with an incoming message. It was from Governor Su Jin on New Busan. The message contained only 2 words: "We're ready." June slipped the device back into his pocket, exchanging a glance with Hana as they approached their diplomatic shuttle. "How long until they realize?" he asked quietly. "They already suspect," Hana replied. "But by the time they confirm what's happening, it will be too late." "And the other species? The ones who've suffered like we have?" A rare smile touched Hana's lips. "Already moving into position. The Krell, the Nomari, the Tavis Collective, they've all been waiting for this moment as long as we have." As their shuttle lifted off from the Concord station, alarms began to sound throughout the vast structure. Emergency protocols activated as Concord officials finally began to grasp what was happening, but it was already too late. Humanity's patience had finally snapped, and the galaxy would never be the same. The first Tarsian patrol fleet never knew what hit them. One moment they were performing standard maneuvers near the disputed Orion border, and the next, 5 human vessels simply appeared beside them, not dropping out of hyperspace with the usual energy signature, but materializing as if they'd been there all along. Admiral Hana Kim stood on the bridge of the HSV Indomitable, watching the confusion play out on her tactical display. The crystalline ships began emergency power-up sequences, but it was already too late. "All vessels disabled," reported her tactical officer. "No casualties. Their life support remains functional." Hana nodded. "Send the message." Across every communication channel, in every language used by the Conquered, the same words were broadcast. "We are not here to destroy. We are here to correct." Meanwhile, in 7 other sectors, the same scene played out with mechanical precision. Human ships appearing from nowhere. Conquered military vessels disabled without a single death. The same message repeated. Light years away, on the Concord capital world of Terrace Prime, the Concord High Council was in chaos. Emergency signals flooded in from every corner of explored space as defensive installations and patrol fleets reported contact with human forces that seemed to materialize without warning. "How is this possible?" demanded the Tarsian High Minister, crystal body flashing with agitated patterns. Their technology was carefully monitored. They have no quantum displacement capability. They do now, replied the intelligence director, a Veldari whose misty form churned with distress. And it appears they've had it for some time. On the primary display, a new alert flashed. The orbital defense grid around Terrace Prime itself was going offline, system by system. Not destroyed. Simply switched off. Get it back online, shouted the defense minister. We can't, came the reply. The command codes have been overridden. Above them, a single human ship appeared in high orbit. Not a battleship or dreadnought, as might be expected for such a bold move, but a diplomatic vessel. Small, unarmed, and completely untouchable as it descended toward the council chambers. Back in human space, Defense Minister Tae Wan stood in the underground command center beneath, Seoul surrounded by holographic displays showing the coordinated human response unfolding across the galaxy. Years of preparation, of hiding their true capabilities were paying off with each new report. Special Forces teams have secured the mining operations in the Epsilon sector, reported his aide. The Tarsians are being detained but unharmed as instructed. Tae Wan nodded. And the Krell contingent? Moving into position. They'll begin their phase in approximately 20 minutes. The Krell, one of 5 primitive species that the Concord had dismissed as unimportant, had been quiet allies of humanity for years. Along with the insectoid Nomari, the amphibious Tavis, the silicon-based Drell, and the gaseous Voon, they had formed a shadow alliance with humans, sharing their own stories of conquered exploitation and suppression. Now they were all moving together, a coordinated response decades in the planning. Sir, called a communications officer, we're receiving a priority transmission from Professor Daeho. His team has successfully disabled the Concord's primary communication network. On his private screen, Taiwan watched as the quantum communication disruption unfolded. The Concord relied on a network of relay stations to coordinate their vast territories. With those stations now offline, each Concord world and fleet was effectively isolated, able to communicate only with nearby systems. It wasn't destruction, it was surgical precision. On the colony world of New Busan, Governor Su Jin stood on the ridge overlooking the valley where Concord mining operations had displaced her people. Below, human special forces were efficiently securing the facility, their movements so well rehearsed they seemed almost choreographed. The Tarsian site manager approached under escort, his crystalline body catching the morning sunlight. This is an outrage, the translator rendered his vibrations. The conquered will respond with overwhelming force. Su Jin smiled slightly. They can certainly try, but I think you'll find that difficult without your communication network, defense, grids, or fleet coordination. She gestured toward the horizon where a squad of Krell warriors was emerging from the tree line, their forearms carrying equipment to begin dismantling the illegal mining operations. You see, she continued, we didn't just prepare ourselves. We found friends. The species you thought too primitive to matter have turned out to be quite valuable allies. Across the galaxy, on the Concord diplomatic station where it had all begun just days earlier, Captain June Park stepped out of his shuttle onto the docking bay. The station was in a state of controlled chaos, not from combat damage but from the systematic shutdown of key systems by human technicians who had secretly installed backdoor access points years ago. A contingent of Moru collective representatives approached, their linked bodies moving in perfect synchronization. What are your demands? They asked without preamble. June smiled. Demands? No. We have terms for a new relationship, one based on actual equality. He handed them a data pad containing humanity's proposed terms. Equal representation in the Concord. Technology sharing. Requirements. Resource allocation reforms. Protection statutes for developing species. This is reasonable, the Moru unit said after reviewing the document, surprise evident in its modulated tones. We expected vengeance. Vengeance is easy, June replied. Building something better is hard. We've chosen the harder path. As the Moru representative departed to share the terms with what remained of the Concord leadership, June received a message from Admiral Hana. The display showed human ships throughout conquered space, all reporting the same thing: objectives achieved with minimal resistance and zero civilian casualties. The operation that had been decades in planning had taken less than 3 standard days to execute. Not through overwhelming destruction or superior firepower, but through meticulous preparation and precisely applied pressure at exactly the right points. The galaxy was learning a lesson that would be remembered for millennia. Humanity's patience was vast but not infinite. And when it finally snapped, the response was not the blind rage or chaotic violence the Concord species had expected. It was something far more terrifying, calculated, controlled, and unstoppable in its methodical execution. The Concord would survive this, but it would never be the same again. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Concord hadn't seen this many species gathered in one place for over 3 centuries. What made this assembly truly historic, however, wasn't just the attendance. It was the location. For the first time since the Concord's formation, the gathering wasn't being held on Terrace Prime or any other founding world. Today, the representatives of 37 spacefaring civilizations sat in a newly constructed chamber on Earth. Sunlight streamed through the vast crystalline dome, designed by human and Drell architects to capture and refract the light in patterns that were pleasing to all known sensory systems. The chamber had been built in what was once Switzerland, nestled among mountains that seemed to cradle the structure in protective arms. Captain June Park stood at the central podium, his diplomatic uniform pressed and perfect, showing no sign of the exhaustion from the 3 weeks of intensive negotiations. Beside him stood Admiral Hana Kim, Governor Su Jin, and Professor Dae-Ho Lee, the core leadership that had orchestrated what was now being called the correction. Across from them sat the conquered High Council, diminished but not destroyed. The Tarsian High Minister's crystalline body reflected subdued patterns of light, a sign of humility that would have been unthinkable a month ago. The Veldari representatives' misty forms were contained in their environmental suits, swirling in slow, contemplative patterns. The joined units of the Moru Collective sat perfectly still, their usual synchronized movements notably absent. "The terms before you are not punitive," June began, his voice calm and clear. "They are corrective. Earth does not seek dominance or revenge. We seek balance." On display screens visible to all attendees, the proposed new charter appeared, translated into all 37 official languages. The terms were straightforward: equal representation for all member species, technology sharing requirements, resource allocation reforms, and protection statutes for developing species. Furthermore, June continued, we propose the establishment of an oversight committee comprising representatives from all member worlds with rotating leadership. No single species or alliance will hold permanent authority over others. The Tarsian High Minister rose, crystal facets catching the light. There was a tense moment as the being considered its words. "The terms are more generous than expected," the translator rendered its vibrations. "We anticipated demands for reparations, at minimum. Many of us expected punitive measures. Punishment would be easy," June replied. "Rebuilding is harder. We choose the harder path." A representative from the Krell Dominion, one of humanity's secret allies, stepped forward. Their 4 powerful arms were folded in a posture of formal address. "For generations, my people were dismissed as primitives." The Krell spoke in carefully practiced common language, foregoing translation devices. "We were denied technology, resources, and respect. Humanity found us worthy of partnership, when the conquered found us worthy only of exploitation. We stand with Earth in this new beginning." Similar statements came from the Nomari, the Tavis, the Drell, and the Voon, species that had been overlooked or actively suppressed by the old Concord order. Each had found in humanity not a conqueror, but a collaborator, helping them develop their own strengths while sharing technology that the conquered had denied them. The oldest member of the Moru Collective, a being who had witnessed the founding of the original conquered centuries ago, moved to the center of the chamber. Its linked units formed a pattern that indicated deep respect. a gesture not seen directed toward humans in all their years of conquered membership. We have existed for millennia, the ancient being's translator conveyed. In that time, we have encountered many species, witnessed many rises and falls of power. What humanity has demonstrated is unique in our experience. The chamber fell silent, all attention focused on the elder Moru. We mistook patience for weakness, it continued. We mistook restraint for inability. We mistook diplomacy for fear. Humanity's capacity for forbearance was matched only by their meticulous preparation for its end. The elder Moru turned to address all assembled species. The lesson here is not that humans were stronger than we believed. The lesson is that strength takes many forms and we recognized only one. A ripple of agreement moved through the chamber, acknowledgement of a truth that many had come to realize during the correction. The Tarsian overlord, highest authority among their kind, moved forward. The being's crystal structure pulsed with colors that indicated genuine confusion. What I cannot comprehend, it said, is why you didn't simply destroy us when you had the chance. Your ships appeared within our defense perimeters. Your technology bypassed our most sophisticated security. You could have eliminated our leadership with surgical precision. Yet you chose restraint. Why? June looked to Admiral Hana, who had commanded the military aspects of the correction. She stepped forward, her uniform bearing the insignia of both, Earth Defense Forces and newly added the insignia of the Reformed Conquered. Because the measure of advancement isn't what species can destroy, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent chamber, but what they choose to preserve when they have every reason not to. Her words hung in the air, simple yet profound. In the days that followed, as the new charter was ratified and implemented, those words became the founding principle of the reformed Galactic Conquered. They were inscribed above the chamber entrance in all 37 languages, a reminder of the moment that changed everything. Deep in the mountains of what had once been Tibet, Professor Deho sat with Captain June on a stone terrace overlooking valleys, shrouded in morning mist. They were among the few who knew the full extent of humanity's preparations, the hidden shipyards, the clandestine technological advancements, the years of careful intelligence gathering. Do you think they'll ever know how close we came to a different response? Deho asked, steam rising from the teacup in his weathered hands. June looked out at the distant peaks, golden in the sunrise. Perhaps, someday, when the lesson won't be misunderstood. And what lesson is that? That restraint isn't just moral, it's strategic. June sipped his tea thoughtfully. Anyone can destroy. Creation is the true test of civilization. Below them, in valleys and cities across Earth, citizens went about their lives most unaware of how close the galaxy had come to conflict. Above them, in orbit and beyond, ships of 37 species moved in harmonious traffic patterns, exchanging goods, knowledge, and culture more freely than ever before. The patience of humanity had finally snapped. But what emerged from that breaking point wasn't destruction, it was something new, something better. A galaxy that would remember for ages to come that the most dangerous species weren't those who rushed to violence, but those who exhausted every peaceful option before, revealing what they were truly capable of. No species would ever forget that lesson.